My name is Bethany Johnson. Today's date is June 4th, 2021. Today I will be discussing all about blood, focusing more on red blood cells, platelets, and what makes up white blood cells today in Lab 2 module. So first I'm going to be talking about red blood cells. And all of these pictures are courtesy of histology. And these are all red blood cells. Actually, red blood cells, the correct name for them are erythrocytes. They are red in color, and they are shaped like biocave discs, approximately about 7.5 micrometers in diameter. They are unucleated, which means that these do not contain a nucleus whatsoever. And hemoglobin is the main protein that are found within the actual cell in general. A really fun fact that I learned with the research within this project, in this presentation, was that 1 to 3 million new red blood cells can enter this cell or within the bloodstream per second. So I thought that was really interesting. The next I will be discussing is platelets. And platelets look like these little kind of like purplish, and they're kind of periodically on here and just kind of surrounding parts of the cell. And these are actually, the medical term for these are thrombocytes. They are kind of shaped like basophilic discs, and they are about the size of about 2 to 4 micrometers in diameter. They kind of resemble kind of pieces of broken plates. If you kind of zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see that they kind of give like this shattered, like if you were to like break a kitchen plate on the floor, and it kind of shatters all in little pieces. So I kind of thought that representation was really cool, and you can kind of see that it just kind of looks like little shattered pieces. Platelets do a couple main things. They help release chemicals to help clot. They help form a temporary patch on broken vessel or on damaged vessel walls, and they also cause contraction to help the clot size when there would be like a cut. The next I will be talking about is white blood cells, and actually what white blood cells in general are called leukocytes. There are 5 types of white blood cells, and these are called neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, monocytes, and lymphocytes. And the first one that I'll be focusing on is neutrophils. And I have a picture again here. This is the whole neutrophil. And actually, neutrophils make up the white blood cells about 50 to 70%. So they are the main amount of white blood cells that you would actually have, which would be the neutrophils. And what they actually do is they kill and digest foreign invaders. They're also known as more of like the frontline workers of a white blood cell, and they have a distinctive nucleus with about 2 to 5 lobes. So you can kind of see in this picture right around here, and the cytoplasm is kind of just around that. And then the next one we have is a lymphocyte. This is a picture of the lymphocyte. And these can kind of range in sizes, and they only make up about 20 to 30% of white blood cells in general. What these actually do is they circulate in the blood and also in the lymphatic organs, kind of like AKA, it's a lymphocyte. Nice way to remember that is that they also circulate in the lymphatic organs. A neat thing about lymphocytes is that they actually contain T and B cells within the white blood cells in general. The lymphocytes are also known as the natural killer cells. The next one of the white blood cells is the monocyte. And this is a picture of a monocyte right here. These are larger cells, as you can tell as the last ones. These are much larger sizes. And they are approximately in between 12 to 20 micrometers in diameter. They kind of resemble kind of like a kidney bean shaped. And they are only, these are more, approximately about 2 to 8% of white blood cells. So there's not a lot of monocytes at all, since there's only 2 to 8%. They are the largest of the white blood cells, again, with a larger cell, approximately about 12 to 20 micrometers in diameter. These are the largest of all of the white blood cells. And what these actually do is that they help break down bacteria by engulfing it, and that is something that we called endocytosis. The next one I have is, let's see what this is. This is an eosinophil, and these only make up about 2 to 4% of all of the white blood cells in general. What they actually do is that they attack with antibodies. They are also great for attacking parasites and also increase in number if somebody has some type of allergic reaction, whether it to be medicine, an insect bite. So these would increase anytime there would be an inflammation, which would obviously normally be you would get inflammation typically from something that you would have an allergic reaction to. These also contain a distinctive large eosinophilic granules, and their nuclei are usually only contain about 2 lobes. So definitely a lot different than the neutrophils, which the neutrophils have 2 to 5 lobes. So the eosinophils are definitely a lot smaller, since they only contain 2 lobes. And last but not least, of the 5th white blood cells, we have basophils. And this is a picture of a basophil here. These are more of a rare white blood cell because they only make up about 1% of white blood cells, and actually maybe even a little less than 1%. I'll zoom in just a little bit more so you can see that. You can actually see some of the platelets in this one too. These cells actually assist with mast cells to produce inflammation. And like I said, these are considered more rare since they're only less than 1% of all of the white blood cells in general. They do appear with large, distinctive basophilic granules. So you can see more of like the clump right there of all of them kind of gathering together. So that is the 5 white blood cells. Now I'm going to discuss one of the disorders or diseases that can also be contributed with the blood system, and actually one that is a little bit more common, and I chose hemophilia. And actually it is a medical condition where the blood does not clot properly. Even the simplest cuts, like if you were to bleed severely, or you would if you were to bleed severely, you would most likely need medical attention. People that don't have this, obviously we have the proper clotting system, where our blood, makes the plug, and then it scabs. But people that with hemophilia, they are not as lucky as people without, because they have a lot more trouble getting that blood to stop. So how does hemophilia happen? Well, it's actually an inherited bleeding disorder that is caused by missing or defective coagulation factor. And coagulation is how things clot. So that is what coagulation is actually caused. And it's actually caused by missing or a defective clotting factor, which is actually a clotting protein. And that protein is normally called factor VIII. So you'll hear a lot of medical people talking about what is the clotting factor. Well, that's actually, or the coagulation factor, and that's factor VIII. And in general, blood contains many proteins, and these are called clotting factors, which would be typically clotting factor VIII. And what happens in general with clotting factor VIII is that it helps to stop the bleeding. So when somebody with hemophilia is faced with a missing or defective clotting mechanisms, you can actually see how dangerous and how life-threatening hemophilia can actually be for that individual. The factor concentrate can be given to replace the deficient factor VIII. At the hospital, a medical doctor can administer that. Typically, the type of medicine that you can actually see is called demopressin acetate, and that is actually a synthetic hormone that can be really helpful in treating a majority of people that have this disorder during an episode, a bleeding episode. A really cool acronym that I actually learned with research on this is called RICE, R-I-C-E, and that actually stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation, which all of this can help slow the bleeding. RICE is actually ultimately important while a bleeding heals, because it can actually take several days or even weeks to heal with somebody that is a hemophiliac and struggles with hemophilia in general. So thank you very much for watching my presentation. I hope you all have a great day.